Chapter 1: Whispers of Withered Grapes. The old Volvo coughed its way up the winding driveway, gravel spitting like teeth from beneath the tires. Dust billowed behind us, a dirty shroud settling over the already dilapidated sign that read, Silas Family Vineyard, Est 1888. Established, more like entombed, I thought, peering through the cracked windshield at the skeletal remains of what was once a grand estate. The sun was setting, painting the sky in bruised purples and oranges, a beautiful yet melancholic vista that did little to soothe the knot of unease tightening in my stomach. Beside me, Sarah, ever the optimist, squeezed my hand. It's got potential, Ben, think of the history. I grunted, potential being a generous word for the overgrown mess before us. Ivy, thick as pythons, strangled the stone walls of the main house, its windows dark and vacant like empty eye sockets. The vineyards, once meticulously manicured, were now a tangled wilderness of withered vines, their skeletal branches clawing at the sky. Even the air felt heavy, thick with the scent of decay and something else, something faintly metallic like old blood. History, I muttered, and probably a whole lot of asbestos and black mold. We inherited the Silas family vineyard from my great-aunt Alara, a woman I barely knew. She was a recluse, a spinster who lived alone on the property, rarely venturing into town. The few stories I'd heard about her painted a picture of an eccentric, a woman obsessed with her vineyard and fiercely protective of her privacy. When the lawyer, Mr. Hawthorne, called with the news of her passing and the surprising inheritance, Sarah and I were both shocked. We were struggling artists, barely scraping by in a cramped Brooklyn apartment, and the prospect of owning a vineyard, even a dilapidated one, seemed like a dream or perhaps a nightmare come true. We were both artists, clinging to the fringes of the New York art scene. I was a sculptor, working with salvaged metal and found objects, trying to breathe life into discarded scraps. Sarah was a painter, her canvases filled with vibrant, abstract landscapes that explored themes of nature and decay. We were drawn to the beauty in the broken, the forgotten, the things that others overlooked. Maybe that's why we were here, drawn to the potential that even this decaying vineyard held. Mr. Hawthorne had been surprisingly vague about the circumstances surrounding Aunt Alara's death. Natural causes, he'd said, but his voice had a certain hesitation, a reluctance to elaborate. He'd also mentioned rumors, whispers of strange occurrences on the property, of townspeople avoiding the Silas family vineyard after dark. I dismissed it as small-town gossip, the kind that always clings to isolated figures like Aunt Alara. But now, standing before the decaying estate, the rumors felt more substantial, more sinister. We parked in front of the house, the engine of the Volvo finally sputtering its last breath. Silence descended, broken only by the rustling of leaves and the distant caw of a crow. The air hung heavy, pregnant with unspoken dread. "Well," Sarah said, her voice a little too bright, "let's get those bags unpacked." We hauled our belongings from the car, the meager contents of our lives crammed into battered suitcases and overflowing cardboard boxes. As I struggled with a particularly heavy box filled with my sculpting tools, I noticed something glinting in the overgrown garden. Curiosity piqued. I set the box down and pushed my way through the tangle of weeds and thorny bushes. Half buried in the earth, I found a small, tarnished silver locket. It was intricately carved with images of grapevines and leaves, its surface blackened with age and dirt. I brushed away the grime, revealing a tiny clasp. With trembling fingers, I opened the locket. Inside were two miniature portraits. One was of a young woman with piercing blue eyes and a stern expression. The other was of a man with a dark mustache and a haunted look in his eyes. They were both dressed in clothing from a bygone era, their faces frozen in time, their stories lost to the whispers of the wind. A sudden chill swept through me, a coldness that had nothing to do with the evening air. I felt a strange connection to these faces, a sense of shared history, of unspoken sorrow. Who were they? And what was their connection to the Silas family vineyard? I closed the locket, the clasp clicking shut with a faint, metallic sound. I shoved it into my pocket, a sudden urge to hide it, to protect it from the prying eyes of the decaying estate. When I returned to the car, Sarah was struggling to open the front door. The lock was rusted and jammed, resisting her every effort. "Damn it," she muttered, "I think it's stuck." I joined her, adding my strength to the effort. After several minutes of wrestling with the lock, it finally gave way with a loud click, the door creaking open with a groan that echoed through the silent courtyard. The interior of the house was even more depressing than the exterior. Dust lay thick on every surface, coating the furniture like a shroud. The air was stale and musty, filled with the odor of decay and neglect. Cobwebs hung like macabre decorations, swaying gently in the draft from the broken windows. "Charming," I said, my voice laced with sarcasm. Sarah ignored me, already venturing further into the house. "Hello," she called out, her voice echoing through the empty rooms. "Anyone here?" Only silence answered her. We spent the next few hours exploring the house, room by room, our footsteps echoing through the cavernous spaces. Each room was filled with relics of the past, forgotten artifacts that spoke of a life lived and lost. There were antique furniture draped in dust sheets, portraits of stern-faced Silas family members hanging on the walls, and bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes, their pages yellowed with age. In the library, I found a collection of old journals, their covers faded and cracked. I picked one up, its pages brittle and fragile. The handwriting was elegant and flowing, the ink faded but still legible. It was Aunt Alara's diary. I flipped through the pages, my eyes scanning the entries. Most of them were mundane, detailing the daily routines of life on the vineyard. The weather, the crops, the challenges of running a failing business. But as I read further, I began to notice a change in tone, a growing sense of unease and paranoia. "The vines are restless tonight," one entry read. "They whisper secrets in the wind, secrets I don't want to hear." Another entry was even more disturbing. I saw him again in the shadows of the vineyard. His eyes were like burning coals filled with hatred. "He wants what is mine, what has always been mine." Who was him, and what did he want? A sudden crash from upstairs startled me, sending a jolt of adrenaline through my veins. I slammed the diary shut and ran towards the staircase, my heart pounding in my chest. "Sarah," I yelled, "what was that?" I took the stairs two at a time, my footsteps echoing through the silent house. When I reached the top, I found Sarah standing in the doorway of one of the bedrooms, her face pale and her eyes wide with fear. I don't know what happened," she stammered. "I was just looking around and then the mirror, it just shattered." I looked into the room. A large, antique mirror lay in shards on the floor, its silvered surface reflecting the dim light of the setting sun. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and shattered glass. "It was like something pushed it," Sarah said, her voice trembling, "like something wanted to scare me." I stared at the shattered mirror, a sense of unease washing over me. It could have been an accident, a simple case of gravity and old age. But something about the way the mirror had shattered, the force with which it had fallen, suggested something more sinister. "It's okay," I said, trying to reassure her and myself. "It was just an old mirror. It probably just came loose from the wall." I led her out of the room, away from the shattered glass and the growing sense of dread. We decided to spend the night in the living room, the only room in the house that felt even remotely habitable. We barricaded the door with furniture, a futile attempt to keep out whatever lurked in the shadows. As darkness descended, the house seemed to come alive. The wind howled through the broken windows, carrying whispers of unseen voices. The floorboards creaked and groaned, as if someone or something was packing through the empty rooms. And from the depths of the vineyard we heard the faint, mournful sound of weeping. We huddled together on the dusty sofa, clinging to each other for comfort. Sleep was impossible. The house was filled with a palpable sense of dread, a feeling that we were not alone, that we were being watched. I reached into my pocket and clutched the silver locket, its cold surface a small comfort in the darkness. The faces of the young woman and the haunted man seemed to stare back at me, their silent stories echoing through the haunted halls of the Silas family vineyard. This was not the dream we had imagined. This was a nightmare, and we were trapped in its suffocating embrace. We had inherited more than just a vineyard. We had inherited a legacy of darkness, a history of secrets and sorrow, and I feared that we would not survive its chilling grip. Chapter 2: The Weight of the Cellar. Sleep was a fitful, broken thing that night. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind whistling through the shattered panes, sent a jolt of adrenaline through me, pulling me back from the edge of oblivion. Sarah, too, was restless, tossing and turning beside me on the dusty sofa. Her eyes were wide and haunted, reflecting the flickering shadows cast by the dying embers in the fireplace. Just before dawn, a particularly loud crash jolted us both awake. It sounded like something heavy had fallen in the basement, a dull thud that resonated through the entire house. "What was that?" Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. I listened intently, straining to hear any further sounds. Silence descended, broken only by the gentle ticking of an antique clock in the hallway. "I don't know," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Maybe it was just the wind. This place is falling apart, remember." But I didn't believe my own words. There was something about the weight of that sound, the sheer force of the impact, that suggested something more than just a gust of wind. "We have to check it out," Sarah said, her voice firm despite the fear in her eyes. We can't just stay here and pretend it didn't happen. I knew she was right. We couldn't ignore the growing sense of dread that permeated the house. We had to confront whatever was lurking in the shadows, even if it meant facing our worst fears. I grabbed a rusty fireplace poker from beside the hearth, its weight a small comfort in my trembling hand. Sarah picked up a heavy candlestick, its brass surface tarnished with age. We crept towards the basement door, our footsteps echoing through the silent house. The basement door was located in the kitchen, a dark, narrow doorway that led down a steep flight of stairs. The air around the doorway was noticeably colder, a chilling draft that seemed to emanate from the depths below. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the doorknob. A wave of nausea washed over me, a primal instinct screaming at me to turn back, to avoid whatever lay hidden in the darkness. "Ready," Sarah whispered, her hand squeezing mine. I took a deep breath and forced myself to nod. "Ready." I turned the doorknob, the latch clicking open with a loud, metallic sound that echoed through the silent kitchen. I pulled the door open, revealing a dark, narrow staircase leading down into the unknown. The air that rushed up from the basement was thick and damp, carrying the scent of mildew and something else, something acrid and unsettling, like rotting fruit. I held my breath and stepped onto the first step, Sarah close behind me. The stairs were steep and uneven, worn smooth by years of use. The darkness was almost absolute, broken only by a faint sliver of light that filtered in from the doorway above. I fumbled for my phone, turning on the flashlight app. The beam of light cut through the darkness, illuminating the crumbling stone walls and the damp, moss-covered steps. As we descended further, the air grew colder and heavier, pressing down on us like a physical weight. The silence was almost deafening, broken only by the drip, drip, drip of water echoing through the darkness. Finally, we reached the bottom of the stairs. The basement was a large, cavernous space with a low ceiling and a dirt floor. The walls were made of rough-hewn stone, their surfaces covered in a thick layer of moss and mold. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and decay, a suffocating stench that made my stomach churn. The beam of my flashlight swept across the room, revealing a chaotic jumble of forgotten objects, broken furniture, rusty tools, and stacks of dusty boxes. Cobwebs hung like macabre decorations, swaying gently in the draft. And in the center of the room, lying on its side amidst a pile of shattered glass and splintered wood, was a large, antique wine press. The wine press was made of dark, heavy wood, its surface intricately carved with images of grapevines and leaves. It was clearly very old, its wooden frame cracked and weathered with age. The mechanism was broken, its gears twisted and mangled. "This must have been what we heard," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It must have just collapsed." I approached the wine press, my flashlight beam focusing on the shattered glass and splintered wood that surrounded it. As I got closer, I noticed something else, something that made my blood run cold. Stained into the dirt floor beneath the broken wine press was a dark, circular stain. It was the color of dried blood, its edges faded and blurred with age. I knelt down, touching the stain with my fingertip. The dirt was damp and cold, clinging to my skin like a shroud. I brought my finger to my nose, inhaling the faint, metallic scent that lingered in the air. It was blood. There was no doubt in my mind. But whose blood, and how long had it been there? A sudden gust of wind swept through the basement, extinguishing my flashlight and plunging us into darkness. A scream escaped my lips, a primal cry of fear and desperation. "Ben," Sarah yelled, her voice trembling. "What happened?" I fumbled for my phone, trying to turn the flashlight back on. My fingers were clumsy and numb, my hands shaking uncontrollably. Finally, the flashlight flickered back to life, its beam cutting through the darkness. I swept the light across the room, searching for Sarah. She was gone. "Sarah," I yelled, my voice cracking with panic. "Where are you?" Only silence answered me. I spun around, my flashlight beam darting across the room, searching every corner, every shadow. The basement seemed to have grown larger, more menacing, its darkness pressing down on me like a suffocating weight. "Sarah, this isn't funny," I yelled, my voice echoing through the cavernous space. "Come on, Sarah, please." Then I heard it, a faint, muffled sound coming from behind the wine press, a whimper. I crept towards the wine press, my heart pounding in my chest. The air was thick with dread, the silence broken only by my own ragged breathing. I rounded the wine press, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. And there, huddled on the floor, her face pale and her eyes wide with terror, was Sarah. She was staring at something behind me, her gaze fixed on a point in the darkness. I followed her gaze, my flashlight beam illuminating the far wall of the basement. And there, etched into the stone wall, was a carving. It was an image of a grapevine, its branches twisted and contorted into grotesque shapes. Hanging from the branches were clusters of grapes, their surfaces shriveled and withered, their skins the color of dried blood. And beneath the grapevine, carved in crude, blocky letters, was a single word, Silas. A wave of nausea washed over me, a dizzying combination of fear and dread. I felt a primal instinct screaming at me to run, to escape this place of darkness and death. But I couldn't move. I was frozen to the spot, paralyzed by the horror of what I had seen. The Silas family, the vineyard, the withered grapes, it all made sense now. This wasn't just a vineyard. It was something more, something darker, something far more sinister. This was a place of sacrifice, a place of blood, and we were trapped in its chilling embrace. As if on cue, the lights flickered and died, plunging the basement into total darkness. A blood-curdling scream pierced the silence, a sound that echoed through the cavernous space and resonated deep within my soul. It was Sarah, and she was screaming for her life. I lunged forward, groping through the darkness, trying to reach her. But the darkness was thick and disorienting, swallowing me whole. I stumbled and fell, crashing to the ground amidst a pile of broken glass and splintered wood. Pain shot through my body, a searing agony that made me gasp for breath. But I couldn't stop. I had to find Sarah. I had to save her. I crawled forward, my hands outstretched, searching for her in the darkness. And then I felt it, something cold and wet clinging to my fingers. It was hair. I followed the hair, my fingers tracing its length. It led me to a face that was cold and clammy, its features contorted in a mask of terror. It was Sarah. But she wasn't moving. She wasn't breathing. I pulled her closer, cradling her in my arms. Her body was limp and lifeless, her skin cold as ice. And then I saw it. A small, dark wound on her neck, a puncture mark that was barely visible in the darkness. It was a bite mark. Something had bitten Sarah. Something had killed her. A wave of grief and rage washed over me, a blinding fury that threatened to consume me. I screamed into the darkness, a primal cry of anguish and despair. And then I heard it, a faint, rustling sound coming from the shadows behind me. Something was moving in the darkness. Something was watching me. I turned slowly, my eyes straining to pierce the darkness, and then I saw it. Two glowing eyes, burning like coals, staring back at me from the shadows. And then a voice, a low, guttural growl that seemed to emanate from the depths of the earth. Silas. The name echoed through the darkness, a chilling reminder of the horror that had consumed my life. I was not alone, and I was next. Chapter 3: The Dance of Decay. Terror, raw and unadulterated, seized me. My mind screamed for escape, for any kind of sanctuary from the glowing eyes that pinned me in the oppressive darkness of the Silas family cellar. Sarah's lifeless body lay heavy in my arms, a chilling reminder of the brutal reality that had shattered our naive dreams. Silas, the voice had rasped, a sound that resonated not just in my ears, but deep within the very bones of the earth surrounding us. I didn't know what Silas was, a person, a creature, a malevolent spirit bound to this cursed land. All I knew was that it had taken Sarah and it was coming for me. Desperation, fueled by grief and the instinct for survival, ignited within me. I couldn't stay here, cradling Sarah's corpse, waiting for whatever lurked in the shadows to claim me as its next victim. I had to move. I had to fight. With a Herculean effort, I gently laid Sarah down on the cold, damp floor, my heart breaking with each movement. I kissed her forehead, a silent promise to avenge her death, to expose the darkness that had consumed her. Then I scrambled to my feet, grabbing the rusty fireplace poker I'd dropped earlier. The weight of the metal felt strangely comforting in my trembling hands, a tangible weapon against the unseen horror. "Show yourself," I yelled, my voice hoarse and cracking. "Come out and face me, you coward." The glowing eyes remained fixed, unblinking, but the voice didn't respond. The only sound was the drip, drip, drip of water echoing through the cellar, each drop a metronome counting down the seconds to my inevitable demise. I swept the poker through the air, trying to ward off whatever was out there. My flashlight was still dead, leaving me blind in the inky blackness. I had to rely on my other senses, on the subtle shifts in air pressure, on the faintest of sounds to guide me. Slowly, cautiously, I began to move towards the glowing eyes, my poker held high, ready to strike. The air grew colder with each step, the scent of decay intensifying, choking me with its foulness. As I drew closer, the glowing eyes began to take shape, resolving themselves into the features of a face. A grotesque face, twisted and contorted into a mask of unimaginable horror. It was human, or at least it had been human once. But now it was something else, something corrupted and twisted by the darkness that permeated this place. Its skin was pale and translucent, stretched taut over its skull. Its eyes were sunken and hollow, burning with an unholy light. Its mouth was a gaping maw filled with rows of jagged, yellowed teeth. And hanging from its neck, glinting in the faint light, was a tarnished silver locket, identical to the one I had found in the garden. The creature lunged, its claws outstretched, its mouth open in a silent scream. I reacted instinctively, swinging the poker with all my might. The metal connected with the creature's skull with a sickening thud. The creature staggered back, momentarily stunned. I seized the opportunity, striking again and again, driven by rage and desperation. The poker found its mark, crushing bone and tearing flesh. The creature roared in agony, a sound that was both human and animal, a horrifying blend of pain and rage. It flailed its arms wildly, its claws tearing at my clothes, drawing blood. I refused to yield. I continued to strike, driven by a primal need to survive. Finally, with one last, desperate blow, I brought the poker down on the creature's head, shattering its skull. The creature collapsed to the ground, its glowing eyes fading into darkness. Silence descended, broken only by my own ragged breathing. I stood there trembling, covered in blood and sweat, the rusty poker still clutched in my hand. I had done it. I had defeated the monster. But the victory felt hollow, meaningless. Sarah was still dead, and the darkness that had consumed her still lingered in the air, waiting to claim its next victim. Slowly, cautiously, I approached the fallen creature, my flashlight still dead, forcing me to rely on the faint ambient light that filtered down from the cellar door. I knelt beside it, my hand reaching out to touch its cold, lifeless face. As my fingers brushed against its skin, I felt a surge of energy, a jolt of electricity that coursed through my body. I recoiled in horror, pulling my hand back as if burned. The creature's body began to convulse, its limbs twitching and spasming. Its skin began to crack and peel, revealing the decaying flesh beneath. The stench of decay intensified, filling the cellar with its nauseating odor. I watched in horror as the creature's body rapidly decomposed, its flesh rotting away before my very eyes. Within minutes, all that remained was a pile of bones and a tarnished silver locket. I stared at the locket, its surface gleaming in the faint light. It was the same locket I had found in the garden, the one that contained the portraits of the young woman and the haunted man. I reached out and picked up the locket, its cold metal sending a shiver down my spine. I opened it, my eyes focusing on the miniature portraits. And then I saw it, a subtle change in the faces of the portraits. The young woman's eyes were no longer stern. They were filled with sorrow, with regret, and the haunted man's eyes were no longer filled with fear. They were filled with hatred, with a burning desire for revenge. A sudden realization washed over me, a chilling understanding of the truth. The young woman and the haunted man were not just portraits. They were spirits, trapped within the locket, their souls bound to the Silas family vineyard. The young woman was Alara Silas, my great-aunt, and the haunted man was Silas. He wasn't just a name. He was a monster, a creature of darkness who had preyed on his own family, corrupting the vineyard with his evil. Alara had tried to contain him, to keep him locked away, but she had failed. And now he was free. I closed the locket, the clasp clicking shut with a faint metallic sound. The locket felt warm in my hand, pulsing with an unseen energy. I knew what I had to do. I had to destroy the locket to break the curse that bound Silas to this place. But how? A memory flashed through my mind, a fleeting image of Aunt Alara's journals. I remembered reading about a ritual, a ceremony that could banish evil spirits. I had to find the journals. I had to find the ritual. And I had to do it quickly before Silas claimed another victim. I turned and fled from the cellar, leaving behind the bones of the monster and the chilling legacy of the Silas family vineyard. I raced back up the stairs, my heart pounding in my chest, my mind racing with possibilities. I had to find the journals. I had to save this place, and I had to avenge Sarah's death. I burst out of the basement door into the relative safety of the kitchen. The sun was beginning to rise, casting a pale light through the broken windows. I ran towards the library, my footsteps echoing through the silent house. I burst through the door, my eyes scanning the bookshelves. There they were, Aunt Alara's journals, still lying on the table where I had left them. I grabbed the journals, my hands trembling. I flipped through the pages, searching for the ritual. And then I found it. A passage written in elegant script, detailing the steps required to banish evil spirits. The ritual required a specific set of ingredients: a silver knife, a handful of salt, a sprig of rosemary, and a vial of holy water. I had no idea where to find these things, but I had to try. I had to do everything in my power to stop Silas. I closed the journals, my mind racing with possibilities. I had to find those ingredients, and I had to do it quickly before it was too late. I turned and ran from the library, determined to face the darkness that had consumed the Silas family vineyard. I would not let Silas win. I would avenge Sarah's death, and I would save this place, even if it meant sacrificing my own life. The hunt had begun, and I was ready to fight. The only problem was, what do I do about Sarah's body? And does Silas know that the locket is in my possession? These questions swirl in my head as I prepare for the next challenge. Chapter 4: The Unhallowed Harvest. The immediate, practical problem slammed into me with the force of a physical blow. Sarah. I couldn't just leave her body in that dank, horrifying cellar. Even in my grief and fear, the thought of her lying there, alone in the dark, was unbearable. I ran back to the kitchen, grabbing a tattered old blanket from a nearby closet. Then, steeling myself, I descended into the cellar once more. The image of the rapidly decomposing Silas still burned in my mind, a grotesque reminder of the evil that permeated this place. But I forced myself to focus on Sarah, on the warmth and light she had brought into my life. I wrapped her body in the blanket, my hands trembling as I lifted her into my arms. She was so light, so fragile. It felt wrong, unnatural. I carried her out of the cellar, up the creaking stairs, and laid her gently on the living room sofa, covering her with the blanket. I knew I couldn't leave her here indefinitely, but I also knew that I couldn't bury her myself, not without alerting the authorities, without explaining what had happened. And how could I possibly explain the truth? No one would believe me. They'd think I was insane. I decided to leave a note, a brief, vague message stating that Sarah had died from an accident and that I was going to seek help. It was a lie, but it was the best I could do under the circumstances. I placed the note on the living room table, hoping that someone would find it soon. Then I turned my attention to the task at hand, finding the ingredients for the banishment ritual. The silver knife seemed like the easiest item to acquire. Most households had at least one piece of silverware. I began searching the kitchen, rummaging through drawers and cabinets, but found nothing but rusty utensils and chipped dishes. I moved on to the dining room, the formal setting suggesting a greater likelihood of finding silver. I opened a dusty china cabinet, revealing a collection of antique silverware, tarnished and forgotten. I grabbed a silver knife, its handle intricately carved with images of grapevines. It felt cold and heavy in my hand, a stark contrast to the warmth of the locket in my pocket. Next, I needed salt. Salt was a staple, something that should be readily available in any kitchen. I returned to the kitchen and searched the pantry, finding a half-empty container of iodized salt. It wasn't fancy, but it would have to do. I poured some of the salt into a small pouch, tying it securely with a piece of twine. The rosemary was more problematic. I didn't recall seeing any rosemary plants in the overgrown garden. I ventured outside, my eyes scanning the tangled wilderness of weeds and bushes. The sun was rising higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the decaying estate. The air was still heavy with the scent of decay, but there was also a faint, earthy aroma, a hint of life struggling to break through the darkness. I pushed my way through the weeds, my hands tearing at the thorny branches. Finally, hidden beneath a tangle of ivy, I found a small rosemary bush, its leaves withered and brown. I carefully plucked a sprig of rosemary, its scent pungent and earthy. I wrapped the sprig in a piece of cloth, hopping to preserve its aroma. The holy water was the most challenging ingredient. I wasn't religious, and I had no idea where to find holy water. The nearest church was miles away, in the town of Eureka. I couldn't risk leaving the vineyard, not with Silas on the loose. Then I remembered something. Aunt Alara's journals had mentioned a hidden spring on the property, a spring that was said to possess healing properties. Perhaps the water from that spring could be considered holy. I consulted the journals, searching for directions to the hidden spring. The directions were vague, cryptic, but I managed to decipher them. The spring was located deep in the vineyard, near a cluster of ancient oak trees. I set off into the vineyard, my silver knife, salt, and rosemary safely stowed in my pockets. The withered vines clawed at me as I walked, their skeletal branches snagging at my clothes. The air was thick with the scent of decay, the smell of withered grapes and rotting earth. As I ventured deeper into the vineyard, I began to notice strange formations in the vines. They were twisted and contorted into grotesque shapes, resembling human figures in agony. Some of the vines were intertwined, forming macabre sculptures that seemed to writhe in the wind. The formations were unsettling, disturbing. They felt intentional, as if someone or something had deliberately shaped the vines into these grotesque forms. I pressed on, determined to find the hidden spring. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, I reached the cluster of ancient oak trees. They were massive, their gnarled branches reaching towards the sky like supplicating arms. Beneath the trees, hidden amongst the roots, I found the spring. It was a small, clear pool of water, surrounded by moss and ferns. The water shimmered in the sunlight, its surface reflecting the sky above. I knelt beside the spring, cupping my hands and drinking the water. It was cold and refreshing, its taste pure and clean. I filled a small vial with the water, sealing it tightly with a cork. I had all the ingredients. Now I just had to perform the ritual. I returned to the house, my mind racing with possibilities. I had to find a safe place to perform the ritual, a place where Silas couldn't interfere. The library seemed like the obvious choice. It was a quiet, secluded room filled with books and knowledge. It felt like a sanctuary, a place of refuge from the darkness. I entered the library, closing the door behind me. I placed the ingredients on the table, arranging them carefully. Then, I consulted Aunt Ilara's journals, rereading the instructions for the banishment ritual. The ritual required me to draw a circle on the floor with salt, to place the rosemary sprig in the center of the circle, and to sprinkle the holy water around the perimeter. Then, I had to recite a specific incantation, a series of ancient words that were said to banish evil spirits. I took a deep breath and began to prepare the ritual. I drew a circle on the floor with salt, its white line a stark contrast to the dark wood. I placed the rosemary sprig in the center of the circle, its scent pungent and earthy. I sprinkled the holy water around the perimeter, its droplets glistening in the sunlight. Then I took the silver knife in my hand, its cold metal sending a shiver down my spine. I held the knife high above my head and began to recite the incantation. The words were strange, unfamiliar, but they flowed easily from my lips. As I spoke, I felt a surge of energy, a tingling sensation that coursed through my body. The air in the library began to shimmer, the shadows dancing on the walls. Suddenly, the door to the library slammed open, revealing Silas standing in the doorway. His eyes were glowing, his face contorted in a mask of rage. "You cannot stop me," he screamed, his voice a guttural growl. "This vineyard belongs to me, and you will all die." He lunged towards me, his claws outstretched, his mouth open in a silent scream. I reacted instinctively, raising the silver knife to defend myself. But then I hesitated. I couldn't bring myself to harm Silas. He was still human, trapped within the body of a monster. He was a victim just like Sarah. My hesitation proved to be fatal. Silas struck me, his claws tearing at my chest, drawing blood. I cried out in pain, stumbling backwards. Silas advanced, his eyes burning with hatred. He was about to deliver the final blow when something extraordinary happened. The silver locket in my pocket began to glow, emitting a bright, white light. The light grew stronger and stronger, filling the library with its radiant glow. Silas recoiled in horror, his eyes widening in disbelief. He clutched at his head, screaming in agony. The light from the locket intensified, engulfing Silas in its radiant glow. He began to convulse, his body shaking violently. And then, with a final ear-splitting scream, Silas vanished. The light from the locket faded, leaving me standing in the library, trembling and covered in blood. The room was silent, the air still shimmering with energy. I looked down at the locket in my hand. It was no longer glowing. It was cold and lifeless, its silver surface tarnished and dull. I had done it. I had banished Silas. But at what cost? I stumbled out of the library, my body aching, my mind numb. I had survived, but I had lost Sarah, and I was forever changed by the horrors I had witnessed. The Silas family vineyard was no longer cursed, but it was also no longer the dream we had imagined. It was a place of death, a place of sorrow. I knew I couldn't stay here. I had to leave, to escape the memories that haunted this place. But where would I go, and what would I do? These questions swirled in my mind as I walked away from the Silas family vineyard, leaving behind the shattered remains of a dream and the chilling legacy of a cursed land. I looked back one last time. In the distance, the vineyard looked almost serene, the withered vines bathed in the golden light of the rising sun. But I knew the truth. Beneath the surface of that beauty lay a darkness, a horror that would forever haunt my soul. I walked on into the unknown, carrying the weight of the cellar and the dance of decay. Chapter 5: Echoes in the Ghost Town. Leaving the Silas family vineyard felt like escaping a suffocating nightmare, but I knew the horror wouldn't simply vanish with distance. It clung to me, a psychic residue staining my thoughts and emotions. The image of Sarah's lifeless eyes, the guttural growl of Silas, the stench of decay, they were all etched into the fabric of my being. I drove aimlessly for hours, the Volvo groaning in protest with every mile. I had no destination in mind, only a desperate need to put as much distance as possible between myself and that cursed place. I needed to breathe clean air, to see open skies, to find some semblance of peace. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of fire and blood, the irony was not lost on me. I found myself driving through the desolate landscape of the American Wild West. The terrain was harsh and unforgiving, a vast expanse of red rock and scrub brush stretching as far as the eye could see. I pulled into a gas station, the only sign of civilization for miles. The attendant, a grizzled old man with squinting eyes and a toothpick perpetually lodged in his mouth, eyed me with suspicion. "Fill her up," he drawled, his voice raspy. "Yeah," I said, "and can you tell me if there's a motel or something around here?" He spat a stream of tobacco juice onto the dusty ground. "Nearest motel's about 50 miles that way," he said, jerking his thumb towards the west. "But there's the old ghost town of Redemption a few miles down the road. Some folks say there's a couple of cabins still standing. A ghost town. Redemption. The names were laden with irony given my recent experiences, but the thought of solitude, of being completely alone in a forgotten place, appealed to me. Redemption, huh? I said. Is it safe? The old man chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. Safe as anywhere, I reckon. Just keep an eye out for rattlesnakes and the occasional coyote. And maybe the echoes. Echoes? I asked, intrigued. He shrugged. Just stories. Folks say you can still hear the voices of the people who lived and died there. But don't pay 'em no mind. It's just the wind playing tricks. I paid for the gas and drove towards Redemption, the setting sun casting long, eerie shadows across the landscape. The road was little more than a dirt track, winding its way through the desolate terrain. As I approached the ghost town, a sense of unease settled over me. The air grew colder, the silence more profound. The ruins of Redemption loomed in the distance, skeletal reminders of a life that had once flourished here. Redemption had been a mining town, built on the promise of silver and gold. But the mines had dried up, the boom had gone bust, and the town had been abandoned, left to crumble and decay under the relentless sun. I drove through the deserted streets, the Volvo's tires crunching on the gravel. The buildings were in ruins, their roofs caved in, their windows boarded up. The once proud saloon was now a pile of rubble, its swinging doors long gone. The church stood sentinel over the town, its steeple reaching towards the heavens like a desperate plea. I found a small cabin on the outskirts of town, its roof still intact, its walls still standing. It was basic, little more than a single room with a fireplace, but it was shelter. I parked the Volvo in front of the cabin and got out, stretching my stiff muscles. The silence was almost deafening, broken only by the whisper of the wind. I felt utterly alone, isolated from the rest of humanity. I entered the cabin, the door creaking open with a groan. The interior was dark and dusty, the air thick with the scent of decay. The furniture was sparse, a rickety bed, a small table, and a couple of chairs. I lit a fire in the fireplace, the flames casting flickering shadows on the walls. The warmth was comforting, chasing away the chill of the desert night. I spent the evening exploring the ghost town, wandering through the deserted streets, imagining the lives of the people who had once lived here. I visited the church, its stained glass windows shattered, its pews covered in dust. I climbed to the top of the hill overlooking the town, gazing out at the vast expanse of desert stretching to the horizon. As darkness descended, the ghost town took on an eerie atmosphere. The shadows lengthened, the silence deepened, and the wind began to howl, carrying whispers of unseen voices. I returned to the cabin, bolting the door shut and piling furniture against it. I sat by the fire, clutching the silver knife I had taken from the Silas family vineyard. The weight of the metal felt reassuring, a reminder that I was not completely defenseless. The wind howled louder, its whispers growing more distinct. I could almost hear the voices of the people who had once lived here, their laughter, their sorrows, their hopes and dreams. Suddenly, I heard a distinct voice, clear and close, as if someone was standing right beside me. "Get out," the voice whispered. "Leave this place. It's not safe for you here." I jumped, startled, spinning around to face the empty cabin. There was no one there, only the flickering fire and the whispering wind. "Who's there?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Show yourself." Only silence answered me. I sat back down by the fire, my heart pounding in my chest. I told myself it was just the wind, playing tricks on my ears. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was not alone. The voice returned, louder this time, more insistent. "Leave now," it whispered. "Before it's too late, you don't belong here." I stood up, my hand gripping the silver knife. I was starting to lose my grip on reality. Was I hallucinating? Was I going insane? "What do you want?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Why are you telling me to leave?" A cold gust of wind swept through the cabin, extinguishing the fire. I was plunged into darkness, the only sound the howling of the wind and the whispering voices. "This town is cursed," the voice whispered. "It devours those who linger. You will become one of us." Terror seized me. I couldn't stay here. I had to leave. I fumbled for the door, tearing away the furniture I had piled against it. I threw the door open and ran out into the night, the wind whipping at my face, the voices chasing after me. I ran towards the Volvo, desperate to escape the ghost town. But as I reached the car, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Standing in the middle of the road, blocking my path, was a figure. It was tall and gaunt, its face hidden in shadow, but I could see its eyes, glowing with an unholy light. "You cannot escape," the figure whispered. "You are mine now." I recognized the voice. It was Silas. He had followed me here. Even in death, he refused to let me go. The hunt had begun again, and this time there was nowhere to run. I need to think. How did Silas follow me here? What he want? And how can I escape this situation? Chapter 6. The Devil Due in Dust and Echoes. Silas, seeing him standing there, gaunt and spectral in the middle of the road, sucked the air from my lungs. It defied logic. I had banished him, hadn't I? The locket had glowed, he had screamed, and then nothing. Yet here he was, radiating malevolence under the cold, uncaring gaze of the desert moon. How? The question pounded in my skull. Did the banishment ritual only work within the confines of the vineyard? Was Silas somehow tethered to me, able to follow wherever I went? Or was he a manifestation of my own guilt and trauma, a psychic phantom haunting my every step? The answer, I realized, didn't matter. What mattered was that he was here, blocking my escape, his glowing eyes promising a fate far worse than death. I had to act, and act quickly. My hand instinctively went to my pocket, clutching the silver knife. It felt inadequate, a mere trinket against the supernatural power that Silas possessed, but it was all I had. "What do you want?" I managed to croak out, my voice trembling despite my efforts to control it. "I banished you. You're supposed to be gone." Silas chuckled, a dry, rasping sound that echoed through the deserted streets of Redemption. "Banished? You think you banished me? I am bound to that land, yes, but I am also more. You merely forced me to retreat to find another vessel. And this place is ripe with echoes, with despair. the perfect hunting ground. Vessel, what was he talking about? My gaze swept over Silas's spectral form, searching for any clue. Then I saw it. A flicker of movement, a subtle contortion of the features, as if Silas's face was superimposed over another. He wasn't inhabiting his own body. He was possessing someone else. My heart sank. Redemption, with its history of hardship and loss, was a breeding ground for lost souls, for vulnerable spirits. Silas had simply latched onto one of them, using their pain and despair as a conduit to manifest in the physical world. That meant that the person standing before me, the person whose body Silas was defiling, was also a victim. And I, in my desperate flight, had inadvertently led Silas to them. Guilt washed over me, a cold, sickening wave. I had to save them, even if it meant sacrificing myself. "Let them go," I said, my voice gaining strength. "This has nothing to do with them. It's about me. Take me, but leave them alone." Silas laughed again, a cruel, mocking sound. "How noble, but you misunderstand. I need a body, a physical form to interact with your world. This one is merely a tool, and soon you will be too." He took a step towards me, his glowing eyes burning into my soul. "I want what you took from me. I want the locket. Give it to me and perhaps I will grant you a swift death." The locket, of course. It was more than just a family heirloom. It was a source of power, a key to controlling the forces that bound Silas to the land, and I had been carrying it around in my pocket like a lucky charm. I hesitated. Giving Silas the locket felt like surrendering, like condemning myself to an eternity of torment. But I couldn't risk the lives of others, not after what happened to Sarah. Slowly, reluctantly, I reached into my pocket and pulled out the locket. Its silver surface was dull and tarnished, its power dormant. "Here," I said, holding it out to Silas. "Take it, just let them go." Silas's eyes gleamed with triumph. He reached out to take the locket, his fingers brushing against mine. As our skin touched, a jolt of energy surged through me, a blinding flash of images and emotions. I saw Silas's past, his twisted desires, his insatiable hunger for power. I felt his rage, his hatred, his desperate need to control the forces that had consumed him. And then I saw something else. A flicker of resistance within the possessed body, a desperate plea for help. The person whose body Silas was inhabiting was still alive, still fighting for control. And they were reaching out to me, begging me to save them. The surge of energy subsided, leaving me trembling and disoriented. But the connection had been made. I knew what I had to do. I didn't hand over the locket. Instead, I clenched it tightly in my fist, drawing strength from its hidden power. "You're wrong, Silas," I said, my voice filled with newfound resolve. "I won't let you win. I won't let you corrupt another innocent soul." I lunged forward, the silver knife held high. I wasn't aiming for Silas. I was aiming for the possessed body, for the fragile vessel that contained his evil. It was a desperate gamble, a reckless act of defiance, but I had nothing left to lose. Silas roared in fury, his spectral form flickering and distorting. He tried to swat me away, but I was too quick. I plunged the silver knife into the possessed body's chest, aiming for the heart. The possessed body gasped, its eyes widening in shock. A tremor ran through its limbs, its features contorting in agony. And then Silas screamed, a high-pitched, ear-splitting shriek that seemed to tear the very fabric of reality. His spectral form flickered and faded, growing weaker and weaker. The possessed body slumped to the ground, its eyes closing, its breathing shallow. I knelt beside them, my heart pounding in my chest. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Can you hear me?" The possessed body stirred, its eyes fluttering open. It looked at me, confusion and fear clouding its features. "What happened?" It whispered, its voice weak and raspy. "Where am I?" I knew then that I had succeeded. Silas was gone, banished from the possessed body, but the battle was far from over. I had to get this person help, to get them away from this cursed place. I helped them to their feet, supporting their weight as we walked towards the Volvo. "It's okay," I said, my voice soothing. "You're safe now. We're getting out of here." We climbed into the car and I started the engine, my hands shaking. As we drove away from Redemption, leaving the ghost town behind us, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Silas was standing in the middle of the road, his spectral form fading into the darkness. But his eyes were still burning, promising a return. The battle was over for now, but the war was far from won. Silas was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for his chance to strike again. I glanced at the person beside me, their face pale and drawn. "What's your name?" I asked. They hesitated for a moment, then whispered, "My name is Hope." Hope. The name was another cruel twist of irony, given the circumstances. But it was also a reminder that even in the darkest of times, even in the face of unimaginable horror, there was always a flicker of light, a spark of possibility. I had saved Hope from Silas's clutches, but I had also inherited a new responsibility. I had to protect her, to keep her safe from the evil that was still hunting us. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but I knew one thing for sure. I would not run. I would not hide. I would face Silas head-on, and I would not rest until he was banished for good. This time for sure. But how? And what are the new abilities I have after touching Silas when he tried to grab the locket? Chapter 7. Inherited Shadows, Whispers of the Past. Hope. The name felt like a fragile promise whispered into the teeth of a storm. As we drove away from the desolate ghost town of Redemption, leaving behind the chilling specter of Silas and the lingering echoes of despair, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were merely delaying the inevitable. We were two wounded souls fleeing a darkness that seemed determined to follow us to the ends of the earth. "Are you feeling any better?" I asked, glancing over at Hope. She was huddled in the passenger seat, her eyes wide and haunted, her body trembling despite the relative warmth of the Volvo. She shook her head slowly. I don't understand what happened. I remember walking into town, feeling lost, alone, and then nothing, just fragments like a broken dream, a voice, a terrible voice, inside my head. The description sent a shiver down my spine. Silas had clearly violated her mind, leaving her traumatized and vulnerable. I needed to get her to a safe place, to a doctor, to someone who could help her heal. "We'll get you to a hospital," I said, my voice reassuring. "They'll take care of you." But as I spoke the words, I knew they were hollow. I couldn't just drop Hope off at a hospital and walk away. Silas was still out there, and he wouldn't hesitate to use her as a pawn to get to me. I had to protect her, to keep her close. Where are we going?" Hope asked, her voice barely audible. I hesitated. I had no plan, no destination. I was simply running, driven by instinct and fear. But I couldn't tell Hope that. She needed to feel safe, to believe that I had a plan. "We're going somewhere safe," I said, trying to sound confident. "Somewhere where Silas can't find us." I knew it was a lie, but it was the only comfort I could offer. As we drove, I couldn't stop thinking about the surge of energy I had felt when Silas touched me, the flood of images and emotions that had overwhelmed my senses. It was more than just a fleeting connection. It was as if I had absorbed something from Silas, a part of his essence, a shadow of his power. I glanced at my hands, turning them over in the dim light of the dashboard. They looked the same, ordinary, but I felt different, changed. I felt aware, as if my senses had been heightened, as if I could perceive things that were previously hidden. I closed my eyes, focusing on the image of Silas's spectral form. And then I heard it, a faint whisper, a voice in my head that wasn't my own. "You cannot hide," the voice whispered. "I will find you. You are mine now." Terror gripped me. Silas was still connected to me, even after being banished from Hope's body. He could still reach me, still influence me. I opened my eyes, gasping for breath. "What's wrong?" Hope asked, her voice filled with concern. "Nothing," I said, forcing a smile. "Just tired." But I couldn't shake the feeling that Silas was inside my head, watching me, waiting for his opportunity to strike. I needed to understand what was happening to me, to figure out how to control the darkness that was now a part of me. And I needed answers. I remembered something Aunt Alara had written in her journals, something about the history of the Silas family, about the ancient powers that were bound to the land. Perhaps the answers I sought could be found in the past, in the secrets that had been buried for generations. I decided to head towards Eureka, the small logging town near the Silas family vineyard. It was a risk, going back to the place where it all began, but I had no other choice. As we drove, I tried to learn more about Hope, to understand the life that Silas had so cruelly interrupted. She was a waitress, she told me, working at a diner in a small town in Nevada. She had been traveling, trying to find herself, when she stumbled upon redemption. She was kind, gentle, and deeply traumatized. I felt a strong sense of responsibility for her, a need to protect her from the darkness that had almost consumed her. We arrived in Eureka late at night, the town shrouded in mist and silence. The air was thick with the scent of redwood and damp earth, a familiar aroma that both comforted and disturbed me. I found a cheap motel on the outskirts of town, a rundown establishment with peeling paint and flickering neon signs. It wasn't much, but it was shelter. I checked us in, paying for 2 rooms. I couldn't risk staying in the same room as Hope, not with Silas whispering in my head. I settled Hope into her room, making sure she had everything she needed. Then, I retreated to my own room, locking the door behind me. I sat on the edge of the bed, my mind racing. I had to find a way to understand what was happening to me, to control the darkness that was growing inside me. I closed my eyes, focusing on the image of the silver locket. I had banished Silas, but the locket still held power, a connection to the ancient forces that haunted the Silas family vineyard. Perhaps the locket could provide the answers I sought. Perhaps it could help me understand the secrets of the past. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the locket. It was cold and lifeless, its silver surface dull and tarnished. I opened it, my eyes focusing on the miniature portraits of Alara and Silas. Their faces were still frozen in time, their expressions enigmatic. I stared at the portraits, trying to decipher their secrets. And then I heard it, a faint whisper, a voice in my head that wasn't my own. "Help us," the voice whispered. "We are trapped, you must free us." The voices of Alara and Silas, trapped within the locket, their spirits yearning for release. I had a new mission. I had to find a way to free Alara and Silas, to break the curse that had bound them to the land for generations. And in doing so, perhaps I could find a way to control the darkness that was now a part of me. The journey ahead was fraught with danger, but I was no longer alone. I had hope, and I had the spirits of Alara and Silas guiding me from beyond the grave. I closed the locket, a new sense of purpose filling me. The hunt for answers had begun, and I would not rest until the truth was revealed, even if it meant confronting the darkest secrets of the Silas family and the shadows that had been inherited by me. Where do I begin? And is trusting these spirits a wise decision? What if Silas is deceiving me from beyond or from within? Chapter 8: Redwood Shadows and Library Lore. Trusting spirits. The very notion seemed absurd, a leap of faith into the abyss of the unknown. But desperation had a way of eroding skepticism, and the whispered pleas from within the locket offered the only thread of hope I could grasp. Were Alara and Silas truly yearning for release, or was this another manipulation, a carefully crafted deception designed to lure me further into their twisted game? I had no way of knowing for sure. But I couldn't afford to dismiss the possibility, however slim, that they were genuine. Silas's presence within my mind was a constant, gnawing anxiety. The whispers were intermittent, fleeting glimpses of his consciousness, his hatred, his relentless desire for the locket. It was like a malignant tumor, slowly growing, threatening to consume me from within. I needed to act quickly, to find a way to sever the connection before he gained complete control. The next morning, I left Hope sleeping in her room and ventured into Eureka, determined to uncover the secrets of the Silas family and the history of the vineyard. The town was quaint, picturesque, but there was an undercurrent of melancholy, a sense of quiet desperation that mirrored my own. I started at the Eureka Public Library, a grand old building with towering shelves filled with dusty volumes. The librarian, a kind-faced woman with spectacles perched on her nose, greeted me with a warm smile. "Can I help you find something?" she asked. "I'm researching the history of the Silas family," I said. They used to own a vineyard outside of town. The librarian's smile faltered slightly. The Silas family. That's a long time ago. I'm not sure we have much information about them. But she led me to the local history section, a dimly lit corner of the library filled with old newspapers, photographs, and genealogical records. I spent hours poring over the documents, piecing together the story of the Silas family. They had been one of the founding families of Eureka, arriving in the area during the gold rush. They had initially made their fortune in mining, but later invested in land, establishing the Silas family vineyard in 1888. The vineyard had flourished for many years, producing award-winning wines. The Silas family had been prominent members of the community, known for their wealth and influence. But then something had gone wrong. The vineyard began to decline, the wines lost their quality, and the Silas family withdrew from public life. Whispers of strange occurrences on the property began to circulate, rumors of madness, violence, and even ritualistic practices. Aunt Alara's great-grandfather, Thaddeus Silas, was mentioned several times in the articles. He was described as an eccentric, a recluse who became obsessed with the occult. He was rumored to have performed dark rituals in the vineyard, seeking to harness the ancient powers of the land. Then there are snippets about town gossips and stories regarding children that went missing back in the day, blaming the Silas family. The whispers were growing stronger, filling my head with fragmented images and emotions. I saw Thaddeus Silas, his eyes burning with fanatical zeal, chanting incantations under the light of the full moon. I felt his ambition, his greed, his desperate desire for power. I also saw the terror of the villagers of the past, that feared that the children will be harmed by the Silas family, and when they went to the property, they never came back. I slammed the book shut, my head pounding. The information was overwhelming, disturbing. I needed to find something more concrete, something that could help me understand what had happened to the Silas family and how to break the curse that bound them to the land. I remembered Aunt Alara's journals. They were filled with cryptic references to ancient rituals, to hidden powers, to a battle against the darkness. Perhaps they contained the answers I sought. I decided to return to the Silas family vineyard. It was a risk, going back to the place where Silas had been born, to the land that was steeped in his evil. But I had no other choice. I returned to the motel and told Hope about my plan. She was hesitant, fearful of returning to the vineyard. "It's too dangerous, Ben," she said. "Silas is still out there. He'll be waiting for us." "I know," I said, "but I have to do this. I have to find a way to stop him, and I think the answers are at the vineyard." I told her about the information I had found at the library, about Thaddeus Silas and his obsession with the occult. I told her about the ancient powers that were said to be bound to the land. "I think Alara was trying to protect the vineyard from Silas," I said. "I think she was trying to contain his evil, and I think she left clues in her journals, clues that can help us break the curse." Hope looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "Okay," she said. "I'll go with you, but we have to be careful. We have to be prepared for anything." I smiled, relieved that she was willing to trust me. "We will be," I said. "We'll face this together." We packed our belongings and drove back towards the Silas family vineyard, the setting sun casting long, eerie shadows across the landscape. The air was heavy with anticipation, a sense that we were about to confront the darkest secrets of the past. As we approached the vineyard, I felt a surge of energy, a tingling sensation that coursed through my body. The spirits of Alara and Silas were growing stronger, their presence more insistent. "We're almost there," I whispered, my hand gripping the silver locket. "Get ready." We parked the Volvo in front of the decaying estate, the same spot where we had first arrived, filled with naive hope. Now we were returning, burdened by grief, fear, and the weight of inherited shadows. The hunt for answers had led us back to the beginning, and I knew that the truth we were about to uncover would change us forever. Let's see what these diaries can tell us, and if the locket has any more history to offer us. It is time to face the truth. Chapter 9: Pages of Perdition. The Silas family vineyard loomed before us, no longer a potential escape from our troubles, but a prison holding secrets we were desperate to unlock. The encroaching darkness amplified the sense of dread, the withered vines seeming to reach out like skeletal fingers, beckoning us into the heart of the nightmare. I unlocked the front door, the familiar creak echoing through the silent house. The air inside was stale and musty, heavy with the scent of decay and forgotten memories. It felt colder than I remembered, as if the very walls were radiating an unearthly chill. "Let's start in the library," I said to Hope, my voice barely above a whisper. "That's where Ilara kept her journals." We made our way to the library, our footsteps echoing through the cavernous rooms. The furniture was still draped in dust sheets, the portraits of stern-faced Silas family members still hanging on the walls, their gazes seeming to follow us as we moved. The library was exactly as I had left it, the journals still lying on the table, waiting to be opened. I sat down, my hand trembling as I reached for the first volume. The journals were a mix of mundane observations and cryptic pronouncements, a jumbled collection of thoughts and emotions that offered glimpses into Ilara's troubled mind. As I read, I began to piece together a clearer picture of the Silas family history and the nature of the curse that plagued them. Thaddeus Silas, Ilara's great-grandfather, had been a brilliant but unstable man, driven by a thirst for knowledge and a desire to control the forces of nature. He had delved into the occult, studying ancient texts and performing forbidden rituals, seeking to unlock the secrets of immortality and power. He believed that the Silas family vineyard was a place of great power, a nexus of energy that could be harnessed for his own purposes. He had built a laboratory in the cellar, where he conducted his experiments, using the vineyard's grapes to create potent elixirs and potions. But Thaddeus's experiments had unleashed something terrible, something he couldn't control. He had opened a door to a dark realm, allowing a malevolent entity to enter our world. The entity had possessed Thaddeus, corrupting his mind and body, turning him into a monster. He had become obsessed with power, driven by a hunger for souls. He had begun to prey on his own family, draining their life force, using their bodies as vessels for his evil. Silas, Ilara's father, had been one of Thaddeus's victims. He had been a kind, gentle man, but Thaddeus had twisted him, turning him into a sadistic monster. Silas had murdered his own wife, Ilara's mother, and had committed countless other atrocities, all under Thaddeus's control. Ilara had witnessed the horrors firsthand, growing up in a house of madness and death. She had dedicated her life to containing the evil that Thaddeus had unleashed, to preventing Silas from causing further harm. She had learned the ancient rituals from her grandmother, a woman who had also fought against the darkness. She had used the silver locket, a family heirloom passed down through generations, to bind Silas to the land, preventing him from leaving the vineyard. But Ilara's efforts had only been partially successful. She had managed to contain Silas, but she hadn't been able to destroy him. He was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for his chance to escape. And now I had inadvertently released him. "This is insane," Hope said, her voice trembling. "This is all just a story, a crazy family legend." I looked at her, my eyes filled with conviction. "It's not just a story, Hope. It's real. I've seen it. I've felt it." I showed her the entries in Ilara's journals, the cryptic descriptions of the rituals, the desperate pleas for help. I told her about the silver locket, about the power it held, about the spirits of Ilara and Silas trapped within. Hope listened, her face growing paler with each word. Finally, she nodded slowly. "I believe you," she said. "I don't understand it, but I believe you." Together, we continued to read the journals, searching for clues, for answers. We learned about the rituals that could be used to banish evil spirits, about the ancient powers that were bound to the land. We also learned about Silas's weaknesses, about the things that could harm him, about the ways to break his control. He was vulnerable to silver, to holy water, to the power of light. He was also weakened by strong emotions, by feelings of love, compassion, and forgiveness. And most importantly, we learned that Silas was dependent on the locket. It was the source of his power, the key to his connection to the physical world. Without it, he was nothing. "We have to destroy the locket," I said, my voice filled with determination. "That's the only way to stop him." But how? The journals didn't offer any specific instructions on how to destroy the locket. They only mentioned that it was a difficult task, requiring great power and a pure heart. "Maybe we can find something in the cellar," Hope said. "Ilara had a laboratory down there, remember? Maybe she left something behind that can help us." I hesitated. The cellar was a place of darkness and death, a place I never wanted to visit again. But Hope was right. We had to explore every possibility, to leave no stone unturned. "Okay," I said, "let's go." We grabbed a couple of flashlights and made our way to the kitchen, towards the door that led down to the cellar. The air grew colder as we approached, the scent of decay intensifying. I opened the door, revealing the dark, narrow staircase that led down into the unknown. A wave of nausea washed over me, a primal instinct screaming at me to turn back. But I couldn't. I had to face my fears, to confront the darkness that had consumed the Silas family. I took a deep breath and stepped onto the first step, hope close behind me. The hunt for answers had led us back to the heart of the nightmare, and I knew that the truth we were about to uncover would test our courage and our resolve. What is waiting us in the cellar, and how do the spirits guide us towards the solution? Chapter 10. Echoes of Experimentation. The cellar stairs groaned beneath our weight, each creak a mournful sigh in the oppressive silence. My flashlight beam danced nervously, illuminating the damp stone walls, the slick moss, the ever-present cobwebs that felt like ghostly fingers brushing against my skin. Hope stayed close behind me, her own flashlight beam mirroring mine, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps. The familiar stench of mildew and decay grew stronger with each step, a physical manifestation of the evil that had festered in this place for generations. Reaching the bottom of the stairs, I felt a wave of nausea. The memory of Sarah's lifeless body, of Silas's spectral form, of the horrifying decomposition I had witnessed, flooded my mind. I forced myself to take a deep breath, to push past the fear and focus on the task at hand. We were here to find a way to destroy the locket, to end the cycle of violence and madness that had plagued the Silas family for so long. The cellar was exactly as I remembered it, a large, cavernous space filled with the remnants of a forgotten life. Broken furniture, rusty tools, and stacks of dusty boxes littered the dirt floor. The wine press, still lying on its side amidst a pile of shattered glass and splintered wood, was a stark reminder of the violence that had occurred here. Ilara's laboratory was supposed to be in the back, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Let's see if we can find it. We moved cautiously through the cellar, our flashlights sweeping across the room, searching for any sign of a hidden space. The air was thick with anticipation, a sense that we were being watched, that unseen eyes were following our every move. As we neared the back wall of the cellar, I noticed a subtle difference in the stonework. There was a section of the wall that appeared to be smoother, more carefully constructed than the rest. It was also slightly recessed, as if it had been built later. I approached the wall, running my hand along its surface. And then I felt it, a faint seam, a barely perceptible crack that ran vertically down the wall. "I think this is it," I said, my voice filled with excitement. "I think this is a hidden door." I pressed against the wall, pushing with all my might. The stone groaned, shifting slightly. And then, with a loud click, the wall swung inward, revealing a narrow passageway leading into darkness. The passageway was even colder and damper than the cellar, the air thick with the scent of chemicals and decay. I hesitated, my hand gripping the silver knife. What awaited us in the darkness? Was this a trap, a carefully constructed illusion designed to lure us to our doom? But I couldn't turn back now. We had come too far, invested too much. We had to see this through, no matter the cost. I took a deep breath and stepped into the passageway, hope close behind me. The hidden door swung shut behind us, plunging us into total darkness. I fumbled for my flashlight, turning it on. The beam of light cut through the darkness, illuminating the narrow passageway. The walls were lined with shelves, filled with jars and bottles containing strange liquids and powders. There were also various instruments, beakers, test tubes, and alembics, all covered in a thick layer of dust. This was Ilara's laboratory, the place where she had conducted her experiments, seeking to understand the secrets of the Silas family and the nature of the curse that plagued them. We moved slowly through the laboratory, our flashlights sweeping across the shelves, examining the various objects. The air was thick with the scent of chemicals, a pungent aroma that made my head spin. As we explored, I began to realize the extent of Ilara's knowledge and dedication. She had been a true scholar, a scientist, a seeker of truth. She had studied ancient texts, experimented with various substances, and performed countless rituals, all in an effort to understand and control the forces that had consumed her family. I found a notebook, its pages filled with Ilara's handwriting. It contained detailed descriptions of her experiments, her theories about the nature of the curse, and her attempts to find a way to destroy the locket. As I read, I learned that the locket was not just a family heirloom. It was a vessel, a container for the souls of Ilara and Silas. It had been created centuries ago by a powerful sorceress, a member of the Silas family who had sought to protect her descendants from the darkness that threatened to consume them. The sorceress had bound her own soul to the locket, along with the soul of the most evil member of the family, creating a balance of light and darkness, a force that could be used to control the curse. But the balance was fragile, easily disrupted. If the locket fell into the wrong hands, if the darkness gained too much power, the curse could be unleashed, wreaking havoc on the world. Ilara had spent her life trying to maintain the balance, to prevent Silas from gaining control of the locket. But she had failed, and now it was up to me to finish what she had started. The notebook contained a detailed description of the ritual that could be used to destroy the locket, a complex ceremony that required a specific set of ingredients and a precise sequence of actions. The ritual had to be performed at the heart of the vineyard, at the site where Thaddeus Silas had first unleashed the darkness. It had to be performed under the light of the full moon, at the exact moment when the moon was at its zenith. And it had to be performed by someone with a pure heart, someone who was willing to sacrifice everything to protect the world from evil. I knew then that I had to perform the ritual. It was my destiny, my purpose. I had been brought to the Silas family vineyard for a reason. I was the only one who could stop Silas, the only one who could break the curse. "We have to do it," I said to Hope, my voice filled with conviction. "We have to perform the ritual." Hope looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "Okay," she said, "let's do it." We gathered the ingredients for the ritual, carefully following Ilara's instructions. We found a silver chalice, a vial of purified water, a sprig of white sage, and a handful of black salt. We also found a strange obsidian knife, its blade as sharp as glass. With the ingredients gathered, we prepared to leave the laboratory, ready to face the darkness that awaited us. As we turned to leave, I noticed something on a nearby shelf that I'd missed before. It was a small wooden box, its surface intricately carved with images of grapevines and leaves. I picked up the box, its weight surprisingly heavy. I opened it. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, was a single, withered grape. It was black, shriveled, and dry, its surface covered in a layer of dust. It looked ancient, as if it had been preserved for centuries. I picked up the grape, its texture rough and brittle against my skin. As I held it, I felt a surge of energy, a tingling sensation that coursed through my body. The grape was alive. It was pulsating with power, radiating an energy that was both terrifying and alluring. I knew then that the grape was more than just a fruit. It was a key, a missing piece of the puzzle. It was the final ingredient needed to perform the ritual, the ingredient that would unlock the full power of the silver locket. I clutched the grape tightly in my hand, determined to use it to break the curse that had plagued the Silas family for so long. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the grape was also a trap, a carefully crafted illusion designed to lead me to my doom. What kind of power is surging inside the withered grape, and what would be the cost of perform the ritual? Also, how can I prevent Silas from sabotaging my mission? Chapter 11. The Zenith Hour Beckons. The withered grape pulsed in my palm, a dark heart beating with an unseen rhythm. It felt unnatural, a concentration of something ancient and potent, both alluring and deeply disturbing. Clutching it felt like holding a piece of the vineyard's soul, a distillation of its history, its suffering, its twisted magic. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was more than just an ingredient for the ritual, that it was a key to something far greater, something I didn't fully understand. "What is it?" Hope asked, her eyes fixed on the grape with a mixture of fascination and apprehension. "I don't know," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "But I think it's important. I think it's the key to destroying the locket." I carefully placed the grape in a small pouch, securing it alongside the other ingredients. We had everything we needed to perform the ritual, but a sense of unease lingered, a feeling that we were missing something, that Silas was still one step ahead of us. We left Alara's laboratory, sealing the hidden door behind us. As we made our way back through the cellar, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The shadows seemed to deepen, the air grew colder, and the whispers in my head intensified. "He knows," I muttered, my hand gripping the silver knife. "What?" Hope asked, startled. "Silas," I said. "He knows what we're planning. He can feel the power of the grape. He'll try to stop us." We quickened our pace, desperate to escape the oppressive atmosphere of the cellar. Reaching the stairs, we practically scrambled up them, bursting into the relative safety of the kitchen. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the decaying estate. The air was heavy with anticipation, a sense that the zenith hour was fast approaching. "We need to find the place where Thaddeus unleashed the darkness," I said. "Ilara's journals mentioned it was at the heart of the vineyard." We consulted the journals, searching for clues about the location of the site. The descriptions were vague, cryptic, but we managed to piece together a general idea. It was near a cluster of ancient oak trees, not far from the hidden spring where I had collected the holy water. "That's where I found the rosemary," I said. "It must be the same place." We set off into the vineyard, the setting sun painting the sky in hues of blood and fire. The withered vines clawed at us as we walked, their skeletal branches snagging at our clothes. The air was thick with the scent of decay, the smell of withered grapes and rotting earth. As we ventured deeper into the vineyard, I felt Silas's presence growing stronger, his voice echoing in my head, his hatred burning in my soul. "You cannot stop me," he whispered. "The vineyard belongs to me. I will not let you destroy what is mine." I ignored him, focusing on the task at hand. We had to reach the site of Thaddeus's transgression before it was too late. We arrived at the cluster of ancient oak trees, the same place where I had found the hidden spring and the rosemary. The trees were massive, their gnarled branches reaching towards the sky like supplicating arms. Beneath the trees there was a clearing, a small patch of earth that was strangely barren, devoid of any vegetation. The ground felt cold and hard beneath my feet, as if the life had been sucked out of it. "This is it," I said, my voice barely audible. "This is the place." The air was thick with a palpable sense of evil, a feeling that we were standing on hallowed ground. I could almost feel the presence of Thaddeus Silas, his twisted spirit still lingering in this place. We began to prepare for the ritual, carefully following Ilara's instructions. We drew a circle on the ground with the black salt, its dark line a stark contrast to the barren earth. We placed the silver chalice in the center of the circle, filling it with the purified water. We arranged the white sage around the perimeter, its scent pungent and cleansing. I took the obsidian knife in my hand, its blade as sharp as glass. I felt a surge of power coursing through me, a connection to the ancient forces that were bound to this place. Hope stood beside me, her face pale but resolute. She held the silver locket in her hands, its surface gleaming in the fading light. "Are you ready?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Ready," she said, her eyes filled with determination. I took a deep breath and began to recite the incantation, the ancient words flowing easily from my lips. As I spoke, I felt a surge of energy, a tingling sensation that coursed through my body. The air in the clearing began to shimmer, the shadows dancing on the trees. Suddenly, the ground began to tremble, the earth shaking beneath our feet. A dark wind swept through the vineyard, carrying whispers of unseen voices. Silas was here. He materialized before us, his spectral form flickering and distorting, his eyes burning with hatred. He was even more terrifying than I remembered, his presence radiating a palpable sense of evil. "You cannot stop me," he screamed, his voice a guttural growl. "The power of the vineyard is mine. I will not let you destroy it." He lunged towards us, his claws outstretched, his mouth open in a silent scream. I raised the obsidian knife, ready to defend myself. But then he stopped. He froze in place, his eyes fixed on the silver locket in Hope's hands. "The locket," he whispered, his voice filled with longing. "Give it to me. It belongs to me." Hope clutched the locket tightly, her face pale but resolute. "No," she said. "It doesn't belong to you. It belongs to everyone, and we're going to use it to stop you." Silas roared in fury, his spectral form growing larger, more menacing. "You cannot comprehend the power of the locket," he said. "It is beyond your control. You will be consumed by its darkness." He reached out to grab the locket, but Hope stepped back, evading his grasp. "We're not afraid of you, Silas," she said. "We know what you are. We know how to stop you." She raised the locket high above her head, its surface gleaming in the fading light. And then she began to chant, reciting the words of the ancient ritual, her voice strong and clear. As she chanted, a surge of energy coursed through the locket, radiating outward in waves of light. The light grew stronger and stronger, engulfing Silas in its radiant glow. He screamed in agony, his spectral form flickering and distorting. He thrashed wildly, trying to escape the light, but it was too late. The light intensified, consuming Silas completely. And then, with a final, ear-splitting shriek, he vanished. The clearing was silent, the air still shimmering with energy. Silas was gone, banished from this realm. I breathed a sigh of relief, my body trembling with exhaustion. We had done it. We had stopped him. But then I felt a sharp pain in my chest. I looked down and saw that the obsidian knife, the knife I had been holding in my hand, was plunged into my heart. I gasped for breath, my lungs filling with blood. Hope screamed, her eyes filled with horror. I looked at her, my vision blurring. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I couldn't stop it." And then darkness consumed me. Now what? What does it mean, and what does that grape do to me? Chapter 12. The Fruit of Sacrifice. Darkness, an absolute, all-encompassing void. It was a nothingness I'd never experienced before, a stark contrast to the chaotic, fear-fueled existence I'd been leading. There was no pain, no fear, no memory, just nothing. Then a flicker, a spark of light in the distance, growing slowly, steadily. It wasn't a harsh, blinding light, but a gentle, warm glow, like the first rays of dawn breaking through a stormy sky. Drawn to it, I felt myself moving, floating towards the light. As I drew closer, I began to see shapes, forms, figures emerging from the darkness. They were familiar, yet different. I saw Sarah, her eyes no longer filled with terror, but with a serene peace I had never witnessed in life. She smiled at me, a radiant, loving smile that melted away the coldness in my heart. "It's not your time, Ben," she said, her voice soft and melodic. "You have more to do." I saw Aunt Alara, her stern features softened, her eyes filled with gratitude. "You have freed us," she said, "but the battle is not yet over. The darkness still lingers. You must find a way to banish it for good." And then I saw Silas, but it wasn't the twisted, monstrous Silas I had come to fear. It was a young man, his face filled with sorrow and regret. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I was weak. I allowed the darkness to consume me. But you are strong. You can break the cycle. You can bring peace to this land." They faded, their forms dissolving into the light, leaving me alone once more. But their words echoed in my mind, their message clear. I had to return. With a jolt, I gasped, air rushing into my lungs. I opened my eyes, blinking against the bright sunlight. I was lying on the ground, the clearing above me a dizzying swirl of green leaves and blue sky. The obsidian knife was still embedded in my chest, its handle protruding from my sternum. Hope was kneeling beside me, her face streaked with tears, her hands hovering over the wound. "Ben, you're alive, but how?" I didn't know how. All I knew was that I was back, and I felt different. The pain was still there, a searing agony in my chest, but it was somehow distant, as if I was observing it from afar. I reached up and touched the obsidian knife, its surface cold and smooth against my fingers. As I touched it, I felt a surge of energy, a tingling sensation that coursed through my body. I pulled the knife from my chest, the wound closing almost instantly, leaving behind only a faint scar. The obsidian blade shimmered in the sunlight, radiating an energy that was both terrifying and alluring. What's happening?" Hope stammered, her eyes wide with disbelief. I looked at my hands, turning them over in the sunlight. They looked the same, ordinary, but I felt different, changed. I felt connected, as if I was part of the vineyard, as if its energy was flowing through my veins. And then I realized what had happened. The withered grape. It wasn't just an ingredient for the ritual. It was a catalyst, a conduit for the power of the vineyard. It had absorbed the darkness that Silas had unleashed, and it had transferred that power to me. The obsidian knife, plunged into my heart, had acted as a lightning rod, channeling the energy of the grape, transforming me into something more. I was no longer just Ben, the struggling artist from Brooklyn. I was something else, something connected to the ancient forces that haunted the Silas family vineyard. I said, my voice barely audible, I think the grape. It saved me, it changed me. Hope helped me to my feet, supporting my weight as we walked towards the Volvo. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the decaying estate. The air was heavy with anticipation, a sense that the final battle was about to begin. "What do we do now?" Hope asked, her eyes filled with apprehension. I looked at her, my eyes filled with newfound resolve. "Now," I said, "we finish this." We drove back towards the decaying mansion, the place where it all began. As we approached, I felt Silas's presence growing stronger, his voice echoing in my head, his hatred burning in my soul. "You cannot defeat me," he whispered. "I am the vineyard, I am the darkness, I will never be gone." I ignored him, focusing on the task at hand. We had to find the source of Silas's power, the place where he was tethered to this world. I remembered something Ilara had written in her journals, something about a hidden chamber beneath the mansion, a place where Thaddeus Silas had performed his darkest rituals. "The hidden chamber," I said. "That's where we need to go." We parked the Volvo in front of the mansion and entered the decaying building, our footsteps echoing through the silent halls. The air was thick with a palpable sense of evil, a feeling that we were being watched, that unseen eyes were following our every move. We made our way towards the library, the place where we had found Ilara's journals. As we approached, I felt Silas's presence growing stronger, his voice echoing in my head, his hatred burning in my soul. "You are fools," he whispered. "You cannot comprehend the power that I possess. You will all die." I ignored him, focusing on the task at hand. We had to find the entrance to the hidden chamber. We entered the library, our eyes scanning the bookshelves, searching for any sign of a hidden door. I remembered something Ilara had written about a secret passage behind one of the bookcases. I ran my hand along the bookshelves, searching for a hidden latch or button. And then I found it. A small, almost imperceptible indentation in one of the books. I pressed the indentation, and the bookcase swung inward, revealing a narrow passageway leading into darkness. "This is it," I said, my voice barely audible. "The entrance to the hidden chamber." We exchanged a look of trepidation. The final confrontation was at hand. What is inside of that hidden chamber? Does it have another Silas trap? Chapter 13. Descent into the Abyss. The passageway was narrow and claustrophobic, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and something else, something acrid and metallic, like the smell of old blood. We moved cautiously forward, our flashlights cutting through the darkness, revealing rough-hewn stone walls and a descending flight of stairs. The air grew colder with each step, the whispers in my head intensifying. Silas's presence was overwhelming now, his hatred palpable, his power radiating outward like a suffocating wave. "Turn back," he whispered, his voice a guttural growl. "This is your last chance. Flee and I may spare you." I ignored him, my hand gripping the obsidian knife, its surface pulsing with dark energy. I was no longer afraid. I had embraced the darkness and I would use it against him. The stairs led us to a heavy wooden door, its surface reinforced with iron bands. The door was sealed shut, a large padlock securing it in place. "We need to break the lock," Hope said, her voice trembling. I examined the lock, its metal rusted and corroded. It looked ancient, as if it had been sealed for centuries. "I don't think we can break it," I said. "We need another way in." I ran my hand along the door, searching for a hidden latch or keyhole. And then I felt it. A small indentation, hidden beneath a layer of rust. I pressed the indentation, and the door clicked open, the padlock falling to the ground with a loud thud. "How did you do that?" Hope asked, her eyes wide with surprise. "I don't know," I said. "I just felt it, like I knew where to press." It was the connection to the vineyard, the power of the grape coursing through my veins. I was attuned to this place, connected to its energy, its secrets. We pushed the door open, revealing a vast, subterranean chamber. The air inside was thick with a palpable sense of evil, a feeling that we had entered a place that was not meant for the living. The chamber was dimly lit by flickering torches, their flames casting grotesque shadows on the walls. The walls were covered in strange symbols, arcane sigils that seemed to writhe and twist before my eyes. In the center of the chamber there was a stone altar, its surface stained with blood. Around the altar there were various instruments of torture, racks, thumbscrews, and iron maidens, all covered in a thick layer of dust. This was Thaddeus Silas's laboratory, the place where he had conducted his darkest rituals, the place where he had unleashed the evil that had consumed his family. "This is horrifying," Hope whispered, her face pale. "He's here," I said, my voice barely audible. "I can feel him." Silas materialized before us, his spectral form towering over us, his eyes burning with hatred. "Welcome," he said, his voice a guttural growl. "Welcome to my domain. I have been waiting for you." He gestured around the chamber, his eyes filled with pride. "This is where it all began," he said. "This is where I gained my power. This is where I will finally be free." He lunged towards us, his claws outstretched, his mouth open in a silent scream. Hope screamed, stumbling backwards. But I stood my ground, my hand gripping the obsidian knife. I was no longer afraid. I had embraced the darkness, and I would use it against him. I raised the obsidian knife, its surface pulsing with dark energy. And then I attacked. I moved with a speed and agility I didn't know I possessed, dodging Silas's attacks, striking with the obsidian knife. The blade cut through his spectral form, causing him to shriek in agony. But Silas was powerful, far more powerful than I had imagined. He retaliated with a force that sent me flying backwards, crashing against the stone wall. I gasped for breath, my body aching, my head spinning. Silas advanced, his eyes burning with triumph. "You cannot defeat me," he said. "This is my domain. I am the master here. You are nothing." He raised his hand, and the torches flickered and died, plunging the chamber into total darkness. I screamed, my heart pounding in my chest. But then I felt it. The power of the grape surging through my veins, illuminating my body with a faint, ethereal glow. I could see Silas, his spectral form distorted and writhing in the darkness. He recoiled in horror, his eyes widening in disbelief. What is that light?" he stammered. "It cannot be." "It's the power of the vineyard," I said, my voice filled with newfound confidence. "It's the power of life, of hope, of love. It's the power that you can never possess." I raised the obsidian knife, its surface pulsing with dark energy. And then I charged. I attacked Silas with a ferocity I didn't know I possessed, my movements guided by instinct, my strikes fueled by rage. The obsidian knife cut through his spectral form again and again, causing him to shriek in agony. Silas fought back, but he was weakening. The power of the vineyard was overwhelming him, draining his strength, consuming his darkness. Finally, with one last desperate blow, I plunged the obsidian knife into Silas's heart. His spectral form erupted in a blinding flash of light, and then nothing. The chamber was silent, the darkness banished. I stood there, trembling, covered in sweat and blood, the obsidian knife still clutched in my hand. Silas was gone. He was finally defeated. I looked around the chamber, my eyes scanning the strange symbols, the torture instruments, the blood-stained altar. This place was a monument to evil, a testament to the darkness that had consumed the Silas family. I couldn't leave it standing. I turned to Hope, who was still standing near the entrance, her face pale but resolute. "We need to destroy this place," I said. "We need to tear it down brick by brick. We need to erase it from existence." Hope nodded, her eyes filled with determination. "Let's do it," she said. Together, we began to destroy the hidden chamber, tearing down the walls, smashing the torture instruments, desecrating the altar. We worked tirelessly, driven by a need to cleanse this place, to purify the land. As we worked, I felt the power of the vineyard flowing through me, guiding me, strengthening me. I was no longer just Ben, the struggling artist from Brooklyn. I was something else, something connected to this place, something determined to protect it from evil. Finally, as the sun began to rise, we finished our work. The hidden chamber was in ruins, its power broken, its darkness banished. We emerged from the passageway, into the library, into the light. The Silas family vineyard was no longer cursed. It was free. But what about me? What have I become, and what will my future hold? Chapter 14. Dawn's Embrace, Echoes of a New Beginning. Emerging from the decimated chamber, blinking against the dawn's embrace, felt like being reborn. The library, once a repository of dusty secrets and lurking dread, now seemed filled with a tentative, hesitant peace. The air was lighter, the shadows less oppressive. The weight of the past, though not entirely lifted, had certainly lessened. Hope and I stood in the library, the exhaustion etched into our faces, the faint scent of smoke and dust clinging to our clothes. We had faced the darkness, we had battled the evil, and we had, against all odds, prevailed. But the victory was bittersweet. Sarah was gone, lost to the horrors of the Silas family legacy. And I was changed. Forever. "What do we do now?" Hope asked, her voice soft, tentative. The question echoed in the quiet library, a reminder of the uncertain path ahead. I had destroyed Silas, but the echoes of his influence, the shadow of the darkness, still lingered within me. I was connected to the vineyard, to its power, to its history. I had become a guardian, a protector. But at what cost? And how would I live with the knowledge of what I had become? "We have to rebuild," I said, my voice filled with conviction. "We have to restore this place, to honor the memory of Sarah, to create something beautiful from the ruins." Hope nodded, her eyes filled with determination. "I'll help you," she said. "I'll do whatever it takes." The offer warmed me, a beacon of hope in the aftermath of the storm. Hope was a survivor, a resilient spirit who had faced unimaginable horrors and emerged with her compassion and her kindness intact. I knew we could face anything together. We began to work, clearing the debris, cleaning the rooms, and slowly breathing life back into the decaying mansion. We spent weeks laboring tirelessly, our days filled with physical exertion, and our nights haunted by the memories of the past. I consulted Ilara's journals, studying her notes on winemaking, on the cultivation of the vines, on the unique qualities of the soil. I began to learn the language of the vineyard, to understand its rhythms, its needs, its secrets. The more I worked, the more I felt a connection to the land, a sense of belonging that had been missing from my life. The vineyard was no longer a source of fear and dread. It was a source of strength, a source of hope. As the weeks turned into months, the vineyard began to transform. The withered vines slowly came back to life, their branches bursting forth with new growth. The grapes ripened under the sun, their surfaces glistening with a deep, rich color. The mansion began to shed its layers of decay, revealing the beauty that had been hidden beneath. We renovated the library, filling the shelves with books, creating a space for reflection and contemplation. We built a new cellar, modern and secure, where we could store and age our wines. We planted new flowers, creating vibrant gardens that brought color and life to the decaying estate. We turned the old laboratory into a meditation space and a working art studio, a place where I could channel my creativity, to express the darkness I had experienced, and to find beauty in the broken. The transformation of the vineyard was a testament to our resilience, to our determination to overcome the past. It was a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable horror, life could flourish. But the darkness wasn't completely gone. I could still feel Silas's presence, his whispers echoing in my head, his hatred lingering in the air. The power of the grape, the connection to the vineyard, had changed me, giving me the strength to fight evil. But it had also made me a target, a magnet for the darkness. One evening, as we were working in the vineyard, I felt a surge of energy, a tingling sensation that coursed through my body. The air grew cold, the shadows deepened, and the whispers in my head intensified. Silas was back. He materialized before me, his spectral form shimmering in the twilight, his eyes burning with rage. "You cannot escape me," he said, his voice a guttural growl. "I am the darkness. I will never be gone." He lunged towards me, his claws outstretched, his mouth open in a silent scream. I was ready for him. I had spent months training, learning to control the power of the vineyard, to channel its energy, to fight the darkness. I met Silas's attack head-on, using my new abilities to counter his moves. I was faster, stronger, more attuned to the forces of the land. The battle was fierce and prolonged. Silas fought with the ferocity of a cornered animal, his spectral form flickering and distorting. But I was able to hold my ground, to parry his attacks, to strike back with the power of the vineyard. Finally, I saw an opening. I lunged forward, plunging the obsidian knife into Silas's spectral heart. The room lit up, a bright light illuminating the area, the same light that was in the hidden chamber. Silas shrieked, his form dissolving into nothingness. I stood there trembling, the obsidian knife still clutched in my hand. I had done it again. I had banished Silas. But this time the victory felt different. It wasn't a sense of relief. It was a feeling of dread, a premonition that the darkness was still out there, waiting for its chance to strike again. I looked at Hope, who was standing beside me, her face pale but resolute. "It's not over, is it?" she asked, her voice barely audible. I shook my head. "No," I said, "it's never over." The sun had set and darkness had fallen over the Silas family vineyard. The hunt had begun again, but we were ready. We were prepared to face the darkness, to protect this place, to fight for a future filled with hope. What challenges await us, and how will we face them? Chapter 15: The Serpent's Seed. The silence that followed Silas's banishment felt heavier than any previous quietude. It was a silence pregnant with unspoken threats, with a sense of waiting, of unseen forces gathering strength in the shadows. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that each banishment was merely a temporary reprieve. Silas, or the essence of his evil, was not truly destroyed. He was a hydra, each decapitation merely spawning new heads, new manifestations of the darkness. Hope and I resumed our work on the vineyard, but a new vigilance had settled over us. We fortified the house, installed security systems, and trained constantly, honing my newfound abilities and preparing for the inevitable return of the darkness. I pored over Ilara's journals, seeking a permanent solution, a way to break the cycle of violence and madness. I studied the ancient rituals, the forbidden knowledge, the secrets of the Silas family that had been buried for generations. I learned that Silas was not the only darkness that haunted the vineyard. There was another, a more subtle, more insidious threat, the serpent's seed. The serpent's seed was a metaphor for the underlying evil that had corrupted the Silas family, a core of darkness that had taken root in the land. It was a force of greed, of ambition, of the lust for power that had driven Thaddeus Silas to his destructive experiments. The serpent's seed could take many forms, manifesting as physical objects, as places, as even people. It could corrupt the innocent, twisting their desires, turning them into instruments of its will. The journals detailed a ritual, a complex and dangerous ceremony that could be used to eradicate the serpent's seed. The ritual required a specific set of ingredients: a drop of pure water from the hidden spring, a single, perfect grape from a vine untouched by blight, a lock of Ilara's hair, and a silver mirror. But the ritual also required a sacrifice, a voluntary offering of one's own life force, a willingness to relinquish a part of oneself to banish the darkness. The sacrifice was the most dangerous part of the ritual. If performed incorrectly, it could unleash the darkness, making the problem even worse. I knew that I had to perform the ritual. It was the only way to truly defeat Silas, to cleanse the vineyard, to protect the world from the darkness that threatened to consume it. But I also knew that the sacrifice was not a light decision. It was the ultimate choice, a potential end. I discussed the ritual with Hope, sharing everything I had learned from Ilara's journals. She listened intently, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "Are you sure this is the right thing to do?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Are you sure there's no other way?" "I don't know," I said, "but I have to try. I can't live with myself if I don't. The safety of the vineyard and maybe the world is at stake." We began to prepare for the ritual, gathering the ingredients, preparing the site. The perfect grape was the easiest thing to find. After all, the vineyard was giving its best grapes for the new season. The lock of Ilara's hair was more difficult. I knew that Ilara had been buried on the property, but her grave had never been marked. I scoured the property, searching for any sign of a grave. Finally, I found it, hidden beneath a tangle of overgrown ivy. The grave was marked by a simple, weathered headstone, its inscription almost completely erased by the passage of time. I brushed away the ivy, revealing the faint outline of Ilara's name and the dates of her birth and death. I carefully retrieved a lock of Ilara's hair from the grave, wrapping it in a piece of silk. As I held the hair, I felt a surge of energy, a connection to Ilara's spirit. I could almost hear her voice, urging me to protect the vineyard, to banish the darkness. The water from the hidden spring, the silver mirror, with those ingredients gathered, we were ready. I performed the ritual. The air was filled with tension and anticipation. As the power of the place started to grow, the energy that it was used to hold started to rise. I set everything up, the mirror in front of me with the power of the moon on it, the water inside a silver chalice, the grape, my own lock of hair ready to be placed. The ritual had to be performed under the light of the full moon, at the exact moment when the moon was at its zenith. I could see the moon looking at me, waiting for the ritual to start. I looked at Hope. Her eyes were filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "Are you ready?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Ready," she said. I began to chant, reciting the ancient words, the syllables that would call on the forces of light and darkness. As I chanted, a surge of energy coursed through me, a tingling sensation that coursed through my body. The air in the clearing began to shimmer, the shadows dancing on the trees. The ritual intensified, the atmosphere crackling with power. I reached for the silver chalice, holding it over the mirror, and dropped the grape in. The grape, now a part of that energy, started to react, to mix, and I placed my own lock of hair, joining the cycle. The time for the sacrifice was coming. A portal started to open, revealing a dark vortex. It was beautiful and scary, ready to consume anything that was there. The power of the vineyard was coursing through my veins, connecting me to the ancient forces that had shaped this land. It was time. "I'm going to do it," I said to Hope. "This is the only way." I placed myself towards the vortex, the only thing that could save us. "Remember me," I said to Hope. I closed my eyes and I jumped into the vortex. This was it. Now what happens? Chapter 16. The Vortex and the Void. The moment I plunged into the vortex was a dizzying, disorienting maelstrom of colors and sensations. The world dissolved into a chaotic swirl of light and darkness, a symphony of chaos that assaulted every sense. I felt my body being ripped apart, stretched thin, and then instantaneously compressed into a point of pure energy. Fear, the primal instinct for survival, threatened to overwhelm me, but I focused on hope, on the future of the vineyard, on the desperate need to complete the ritual and banish the serpent's seed. Then, as abruptly as it began, the chaos subsided. The swirling colors coalesced into a single, piercing light, and the sensation of disintegration gave way to an eerie, unsettling stillness. I found myself in a void, a limitless expanse of nothingness, a realm beyond space and time. There was no ground beneath my feet, no sky above my head. There was only emptiness. And yet within that emptiness I felt a presence, a consciousness, a cold, calculating intelligence. "Silas." "Welcome, Ben." His voice echoed through the void, a sound that seemed to resonate not just in my ears but deep within my very soul. "You have finally arrived." He materialized before me, his spectral form no longer distorted or flickering, but whole and solid, radiating an almost palpable power. He was no longer the grotesque monster of the cellar or the tormented spirit of the vineyard. He was something more. "You cannot defeat me," he said, his voice cold and devoid of emotion. "You cannot comprehend the forces that I command. You have sacrificed yourself for nothing." "I sacrificed myself for hope," I said, my voice echoing in the void. "For the vineyard, for the world." "Such sentimentality," Silas sneered. "It is a weakness, and it will be your undoing." He gestured around the void, his eyes filled with amusement. "This is the place where all things converge, the nexus of power, the heart of the serpent's seed. It is where I can shape reality, where I can control the forces of creation. I looked around the void, realizing the horrifying truth. I wasn't just in a realm beyond space and time. I was at the source of all the darkness, the very essence of the evil that had plagued the Silas family for centuries. "You are trapped," Silas said, "trapped in the void with me. There is no escape." I realized he was right. There was no exit, no way back to the world I knew. I was alone, lost in the darkness, at the mercy of Silas's power. A wave of despair washed over me, threatening to consume me. But then I thought of hope, of the life we had built, of the future we had planned. I had to fight. I had to find a way to defeat Silas, to escape the void, to return to the world and protect everything I had sacrificed for. I closed my eyes, focusing on the power of the vineyard, on the energy that had coursed through me, that had transformed me. I reached out, extending my consciousness into the void, searching for a connection, a way to channel the energy of the land. Silas laughed, a cruel, mocking sound. "You are wasting your time," he said. "There is no power here, only me." But I persisted, pushing through the darkness, refusing to yield. And then I felt it. A faint flicker, a spark of light in the distance, a connection to the world I had left behind. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there. It was hope calling to me, her spirit reaching out across the void. I focused all my energy on the connection, drawing on her strength, her courage, her unwavering belief in the goodness of the world. I visualized the vineyard, the sun, the wind, the rain. I called to mind all the beauty that was present there. And then I felt it, a surge of energy, a surge of power that coursed through me, giving me the strength to fight. "You cannot win," Silas said, his voice filled with uncertainty. "This is my domain. You are powerless here." I opened my eyes, my body glowing with the light of the vineyard. "I am not powerless," I said. "I have the power of the vineyard, and I have the power of love, and that is more powerful than any darkness." I lunged toward Silas, my fists clenched, ready to fight. The battle began, a clash of light and darkness that echoed through the void. Silas attacked with a fury, unleashing all of his power. He conjured illusions, manipulated the fabric of reality, trying to overwhelm me, to crush me with his power. But I was strong. I had the power of the vineyard coursing through my veins, guiding my movements, strengthening my resolve. I was a force of nature, a guardian, a protector. I fought with a ferocity, dodging his attacks, striking back with all my might. The void trembled with the force of our battle, the fabric of reality straining under the weight of our conflict. Finally, I saw an opening. I lunged forward, striking Silas with the full force of my power. The impact was devastating. Silas screamed, his spectral form flickering and distorting. He recoiled, his eyes widening in terror. "No," he screamed. "It cannot be. You are not supposed to be this strong." He tried to fight back, but it was too late. The energy of the vineyard had taken hold, consuming his darkness, banishing him from the void. With a final, ear-splitting shriek, Silas vanished, leaving me standing alone in the silence. The void remained, but it was no longer filled with his presence. It was empty. And then I felt it. A tug, a pull, a force drawing me back towards the world I had left behind. Hope was waiting for me. I had to go. I closed my eyes, focusing on the connection, on the life that awaited me. And I let go, surrendering to the pull of the world. What awaits me when I go back? Chapter 17. The Vine's Embrace, a Future Unwritten. The return was less a journey and more a snap back into reality. One moment I was suspended in the silent, echoing void, the echo of Silas's final scream still ringing in some distant corner of my mind. The next, I was gasping for air, my body sprawled on the barren earth of the clearing beneath the full moon. Above me, Hope knelt, her face etched with worry and relief, her hand outstretched towards me. The ritual circle, drawn with black salt, was still intact, the silver chalice holding the remnants of the ingredients that had banished me, however temporarily, to the realm of Silas. "Ben, you're back. You're really back," Hope cried, her voice choked with emotion. Tears streamed down her face as she helped me sit up, her touch surprisingly firm and grounding. The familiar scent of the vineyard filled my lungs, the cool night air a balm to my overheated skin. I looked around, taking in the ancient oak trees, the shimmering moonlight, the reassuring presence of hope. The world was real again, tangible, vibrant with life. But something was different. The connection to the vineyard, the surge of power that had coursed through me during the battle in the void, remained. It was a subtle hum beneath the surface of my awareness, a constant reminder of the darkness I had faced and the responsibility I now carried. I think it worked," I said, my voice hoarse. "Silas is gone, at least, for now." Hope nodded, wiping away her tears. "I felt it," she said, "the energy. It just vanished, like a light switch being flipped." We stood there for a long moment, simply holding each other, drawing strength from our shared experience. The night was quiet, peaceful, the vineyard seemingly at rest. But I knew that the tranquility was fragile, that the darkness could return at any moment. The eradication of the serpent's seed, the power I was able to obtain, did not guarantee it was over. Even with the source controlled and erased, its effect could still be felt for decades. We needed a plan, a long-term strategy to protect the vineyard, to prevent the darkness from taking root again. We needed to rebuild the community, to attract new people, to cultivate a sense of hope and resilience that could withstand any future threat. "We need to make the vineyard a sanctuary," I said, my voice firm. "A place where people can come to heal, to find peace, to connect with the natural world." Hope smiled, her eyes filled with understanding. "I like that idea," she said, "a place of healing, and maybe a place for art." We spent the rest of the night discussing our plans, sketching out ideas for the future of the vineyard. We talked about restoring the old farmhouse, turning it into a bed and breakfast. We envisioned a community center, a place where local artists could display their work, where workshops and retreats could be held. We also talked about the importance of sustainability, of respecting the land, of living in harmony with nature. We agreed to implement organic farming practices, to reduce our carbon footprint, and to preserve the natural beauty of the vineyard. As the sun began to rise, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink, a sense of hope filled the air. The darkness was not completely gone, but we had faced it. We had survived, and we had emerged stronger, more determined than ever. The future was uncertain, unwritten, but we were ready to face it together. Over the next several years, the Silas family vineyard underwent a transformation unlike anything I could have imagined. With hope by my side, it became a haven for artists, healers, and anyone seeking solace from the modern world. Word spread and people came. We converted the estate into a working artist commune, a sanctuary where creativity flourished amidst the vines and the ancient oaks. The old farmhouse became a charming bed and breakfast, attracting visitors from all over the world who came to experience the beauty and tranquility of the land. Hope, with her warm heart and infectious enthusiasm, became a beloved figure in the community, organizing art workshops, hosting music festivals, and welcoming everyone with open arms. My own art bloomed as well, inspired by my experience. I started a new career as a sculpture artist. The vineyard became a powerful draw as many wanted to see the place that gave birth to my dark-inspired art. In truth, they wanted to see the vineyard that held such power. The power would always be a part of me. I am the guardian of this sacred land. The serpent's seed, if it still lurked beneath the surface, remained dormant, kept at bay by the collective energy of the community, by the light that we had brought to this once dark place. The end.